We're not here to create Disneyland. We're not here to create an Apple check-in system. They're doing some things really well. So we're going to borrow some of those things that just help.
The growth exposes the cracks.
Did we change your values in the slightest?
Not at all. We actually, I think, made them more visible and more a reality.
Everybody needs encouragement. I hesitate to call it a job, but it is a job unlike any other job. You deal with all aspects of the human being, and you deal with a high level of criticism for yourself.
I'm going to give feedback, but I'm going to tie it to either one of our priorities or one of our values. I think they receive it better too. If some pastors were honored sooner in their trajectory, it actually, in a weird way, does keep you humble.
If you want to experience this kind of encouragement, this kind of love, etc., you also have to give it. So in your own circle, to your own pastors, how often are you building them up to the point where they're like, it's getting uncomfortable? Okay?
Right.
Because that's when they're starting to hear it.
As you guys have noticed, I'm kind of changing the tagline of our channel. I actually think my channel has been embodying this for quite a while. I just feel like I've been hitting some clarity. Is at our church, we say we don't make attenders, we make disciples, and we cross out the attenders. In the same way, we're doing this with this channel, where we are not here to be, I believe pastors aren't called to be Sunday directors, we're called to be spiritual directors. Now, I do know spiritual director is like an actual position with like things that pastors maybe aren't qualified for, and that's actually something my guest today is actually in the process of getting a certificate for, so... Yes. Hello, Jace Tuttle.
Nice to see
Welcome
you.
to the podcast. But I do want to talk about that topic. So Jace is my coach, for lack of a better term, and he's helping us process just our church organizationally. At this point, you maybe would have seen our vlog by now. I made a documentary of us hanging out all week, just wrestling with some concepts about us hitting whitewater. But I do want to address the elephant in the room and process this with you. Is I actually think, man, I've gone back and forth in my time as a pastor where I think in the beginning maybe I was so pure spiritual director that I didn't, like, everything was so dysfunctional on Sundays, right? The teams weren't identified. There wasn't a clear leadership communication structure. So like in my mind, Sunday director is not the villain. It's just that, man, can we raise our imagination of really recognizing what pastors do? Because I don't want to be enslaved from the Sunday to Sunday. I don't want to have to think about my whole momentum of church is like Mother's Day is coming. So I got to make sure I get the right gift and then we'll be able to grow. Like, to me, that's not inspiring. That's actually not helpful. I don't think it's, and that's not to say gifts are great on Mother's Day. So I feel the tension. Do you know what I mean?
Recognize the moms. You should recognize the moms.
Yes. Yeah.
I remember, like, if you rewind it probably 18 months ago, when we first started talking, you talked a lot about leading through preaching, right?
Okay.
That was
like
that was the way that you kind of did it. And there's nothing wrong with that. But at some point, I think you outgrow the size a little bit of like the house church, where that really is the most effective thing that you can do. Right. And so, like, you have to recognize that there is this thing that starts to be created, whether you acknowledge it or not. You have this body of people who is helping you put something together to do the Sunday thing.
Yeah.
Right. And it starts out very organic, or it's like, okay, it's just set up and tear down, and there's not anything to do throughout the week on some of those things. But as you grow, there's a little bit more to do.
Yeah.
That little bit more to do turns into a culture. Right. And so then it's like, well, okay, you can ignore it, but it's going to keep developing.
Yeah.
I think that's the part that most people don't realize is, like, you're going to develop a culture.
Are you going to be, so like in formation world, you can either be unintentionally
Exactly.
formed or intentionally formed.
Yep. And this is no different. So I think that's the fun part, is like, all of a sudden you look up and you're like, oh, this is the way people have interpreted my leading through preaching, but translated it into their actions.
So we can have a culture that's by design or a culture that's by default. And by default is usually a lot of my shadow side, just like all of who I am, which is not always the most beautiful thing to see. Right?
Yeah. I think it's a very fun thing, right? When you approach it from so it's like, it's either a reactive thing or it's a proactive thing.
Yes. Okay.
And so when you're taking the best parts of yourself acknowledging the shadow side, that's totally a big piece of this in leadership. You're the one though who has to keep the tightest tabs on your shadow side. But then there's this proactive thing where it's like through my leading and through intentional bringing other people along, you're actually starting to develop a culture and say, these are our values. These are like, this is something that you guys did early on. What do you call them? Like the 5 nevers, right?
Yeah.
Like these are some of those pieces. So I think it would be worthwhile like recapping just like what you guys had started to set up.
Yeah.
Because I think it was such a gift to come in with like, we've got a lot of stuff here.
Yeah.
Right? But then it's like, okay, how do we actually, it's the knowledge piece, but then we actually have to put it into practice. And that's really where the bridge starts to become a proactive culture.
Yeah.
Right. You start to actually say, okay, are we embodying that particular value or that particular, thing that we said we care about?
Which actually makes it more of the spiritual director thing again. So there's actually a way to make Sunday mornings, quote unquote, efficient or even a well-oiled machine. But the core, the bottom of it is it's because we're kingdom people. It's because we never stop learning. It's because we never compare. So those things can then all of a sudden, it looks from the outside maybe quickly, oh, they have a good Sunday director, which we do.
Sure.
But the pastors, I'm
yeah. Like, okay.
I know it's not wise to, I'm trying to keep saying we're not pitting these against each other.
No, not
but like
at all.
All week that we did this week, most of the time I felt like we were fixing the Sunday director part. But that way I can be freed to do soul care.
And what's the fundamental difference between our normal conversations and this past week?
I mean, there's a lot, but what
the difference in the pacing, right? So like some of it is like this was an intentional week set aside to go because I asked you straight up. I said, give me a list of the challenges that you're experiencing.
Right.
And so we're going to come and have some FaceTime together to actually work through some of those challenges because it's just easier than Zoom, but we also needed to get more people in the room, different types of people, like and there's just something about getting together, right? So like that's the beauty of it. But the fundamental difference is like when you and I are doing the coaching, it's much more helping you think through and arrive at the solution, not giving you the solution, right?
Yeah.
But this week it was a lot more of here are some frameworks, here are some best practices, but half the time I'll go, here, you figure it out. Like I'm giving you the framework and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I think the fun part, okay, so let's use a real example. Like you have a check-in process for kids. And I know this is one of the things that we talked about, right? There's just some practical things that like from my experience, whether it was from Apple or just different types of things, like here's how you create a great customer experience. You've been to Disney 1 billion times. Like you know what some of these hallmarks are, right? We could over spiritualize them, but I can tell you how it works on the shadow side easier, right? So if the check-in process is just about efficiency, you tell your person who's doing check-in, do it in less than 30 seconds, get them checked in and get them where they need to be.
Right.
The version though that's kingdom oriented is, okay, how often does Jesus talk about the little children?
Right. Say hi. We have a rule, like say hi to the kids first to make them feel loved and cared for.
That's the kingdom version of the same thing.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that we can learn. Like you can streamline a lot of things, but when you just get into a room and all you do is streamline, and all you do is like get to efficiency and things like that, you can do it all and it would be an amazing experience, but it may not be a kingdom-based experience. And I think that's the fundamental difference to me is that we're not here to create Disneyland. We're not here to create an Apple check-in system. They're doing some things really well. So we're going to borrow some of those things that just help other little like things that trip people up get out of the way. But at the same time, I'm here to serve. So if one person needs to spend 20 minutes reassuring a new mom that her kids are going to be safe, they're going to have a good time, they're going to learn about Jesus, like that is what you want to empower your people to do because it's a people first culture.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really helpful. And I think to point to our values is because we're honor filled. So it's like, okay, we are honoring people and honoring their experience. Yeah. And so that's another thing that you've helped. So I don't want to jump ahead of the gun. So again, maybe about 18 months ago, really last August, you flew in and actually were like, what do you have? Where are we going? And kind of helping some things. And I was encouraged. By the way, go to the link in description if you're interested. Also have him as a coach, narrowandsparrow.com. But what I was encouraged by is I actually wasn't that far off. It just wasn't like clarified and communicated always, right? Like you were able to unearth things like, oh, like we didn't, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. So like in my mind, here's sort of the four pillars that we work under. And pillars is not the right word, but it's four core things, right? So it is the values piece, right? And that's the very first piece, which you guys had a lot of that, and we'll talk more about that in a second. But it's values, and then the values help determine your priority. Okay, so we're working out of our values, and that's what's telling us what we should and shouldn't be doing. So it actually you gain a lot of clarity very quickly when you have clearly defined values. From there, you've developed a brand. Now that can feel like an icky word in the church, but the reality is
another word.
It can be, yeah. So, but it's more of the exterior facing version of things. Like what people come to expect from you is because you've embodied your values and you've set priorities and you've focused on things. Now you're being associated with other things.
Yeah.
And then those three combined create the experience. And by experience, all I mean is how people are actually experiencing what you're putting out there. Right?
So is the brand just like 1 + 1 = 2? So like values plus priorities equals brand. But then when you see the brand, you go, okay, maybe that makes us tinker with the values and priorities. Or when we see the brand or we understand how people feel our experience, it's helping us identify the shadow side of those values. And it doesn't mean you toss out the values, but it means you clarify them and you acknowledge the dark version of these things.
Yeah. So let's take a like silly example. You do an event, right? So like you're going to do an event and you're going to put this thing on. And I remember a long time ago at Passion, like this was a thing, no paper signs. Okay.
Yeah.
So like I was a volunteer there for a little bit, and it's like
door holder.
Yeah. I was unofficial door holder.
Nice.
I was both an attendee and it was fun.
Nice.
But there's just a rule, no paper signs. Okay. So on the face of it, that just seems pretty arbitrary and like why?
Sure.
But the idea was that we should be a type of organization that plans things well enough. And their solution was always put a human in its place.
Yeah.
So if we forgot to do something, put a personal human touch on it.
Yeah.
So instead, I actually became at one point the sign by standing here directing people because it was just unclear that you go from this area to check in.
Right.
So they put me in the actual space to fill that gap and to become the sign. That embodied their cultures because it was not part of the overall brand to have a paper sign. We do things with excellence, etc. So I think what it is when people experience it, take any brand you want, when they do something contrary to what you're used to,
yeah,
you stop and pause. Now, you can leverage that, which is really cool. And we can get back to that in a minute, but like that's where you can actually leverage it. Sometimes you want to do that in a provocative way.
Yeah.
Sometimes you really want to, but sometimes you're using it as a way to reassure people that they actually understand who you are, what you're offering them, etc.
Which can go in a whole conversation. We're in an interesting era because like it seems like Apple has forgotten some of its core values. Disney has forgotten some of its core values. A lot of these that we were raised in and like proud to like be a part of has kind of forgotten the first priorities.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so that happens. So in my vlog, I mentioned this book called Predictable Success by Les McKeown, and he says that same thing. So he says like the beginning of your organization is all about people, and your people actually kind of define. So like what you've been saying, like at the initial stage, like our church has a lot of my values because that's just naturally going to happen. But eventually it outgrows me, but it has to in a healthy way and all of that. But it is all about people. But then you learn at the whitewater stage, which is where we're at, okay, there actually needs to be very well-defined processes in order to actually help the people win and know that they're winning. But in his like stages of an organization, you all of a sudden, like the government, have so much red tape, so many processes, and you empower people who just love the process. They've lost the heartbeat. And so you see that like, I love Walt Disney's quote. He said back in the day, we don't make movies to make money. We make money to make movies. And I think if you were to look at what they're doing today, they make movies to make money. And the irony is that they're not making as much money now.
There are so many versions of that idea. Apple had the same concept. If we make great products, the money will naturally follow.
Yeah.
Okay. So like, let's use the classic example at Apple. For over a year in like 97, they sold the idea of Think Different.
Yeah, right.
They literally didn't have a product yet. They had scrapped the entire product line.
Funny.
And Steve Jobs it's a famous story now, but like drew this grid and he's like, we're going to do 4 things, right? It's a desktop and a laptop for both consumers and professionals. Okay. They didn't have any of this yet. So for over a year, they market this think different idea, and they're selling this idea that Apple is all about think different, right? Not thinking different, but think different.
Okay.
So they sell this whole thing. And then by the time they release the iMac, right, it's the most far-fetched thing everybody was used to beige boxes. And they introduced this thing. It's like in Bondi Blue, was the name of the one of them. And you could literally see through and see the tube. We don't have tubes
those were
anymore.
So cool in elementary school.
They were amazing.
Those. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but the heart behind that is you're selling the culture and the idea. And what they wanted to do is inspire both internal and external people to say there's a different way. And so when you saw the different way, all of that brand equity that you had built, here's just a massive deposit into that because we fulfilled it.
So what we have done at our church is we really set ourselves up, and it's a very strict North Star because we don't make attenders, we make disciples. Mm-hmm. And by the way, I don't even know if attenders is like technically a word because I think like in theory it's attendee. Yeah. But that's also to the point of like, I think the way we talk around here, attender makes total sense. Attendee sounds weird, which goes again to like the heart of like, let's speak the common man's language to like grab their heart. But then it's like, cool. But if we start doing a bunch of events that just seem to be about attenders, we have a lot of mad people on our hands or disappointed or they're gone. And that's actually a great accountability. But like we set the bar pretty high.
So that was so much of this week was going, how does this fit back to that North Star?
Yeah.
How does this fit back to that North Star? And so it becomes...
And that's what it would assure me. Like, okay, we do have to do this process because it actually does help us.
It does.
Make disciples.
Yes, absolutely. And so like, and there's a lot of clarity that comes from being able to question your own stuff without necessarily throwing it back, but also not holding it too tightly. Like that's an exercise and a skill that you have to learn to be able to do is to evaluate
of humility.
It. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. How many things in the last week or so do you think we have potentially changed? Like not all of them have rolled out yet and that kind of stuff, but like how many things do you think we might have changed that were solid decisions that made sense at the time a year ago?
Oh man. I think every decision that we changed, it made sense for where we were 18 months ago because we've doubled this past year. So like a lot of that stuff. Yeah. The growth exposes the cracks.
Did we change your values in the slightest?
Not at all. We actually, I think, made them more visible and more a reality. So that's a really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So the farther you go into your values. Now. Good. I did my job.
I feel better about this week.
Yeah. The farther you go into your values, the more clearly you define them, the easier it is to make the right decisions. But here's the thing, like in the beginning, you have aspirational values.
Yeah.
Now you have values that are built on experience. Mm-hmm. And then you start to look at it and you're like, okay, that was fine for that period of time, but it's like any sort of layers. I think you and I were talking even yesterday about this idea of like healing as a classic example of like, you may have been healed from something and it's one aspect of that in your heart that like, okay, that's no longer a struggle for me, or that's no longer a wound for me, things like that. And this is where like, I will always, just in case anybody's asking, I will always blur the line between spiritual direction and this thing that we call coaching and all that other stuff, because that's where I care more than anything about. So, but it's that thing of you got a little bit of scabs and then it becomes a scar. And then it's like you start to see other pieces that need to be dealt with. Mm-hmm. This is the same thing of any organization. There are new complexities that arise. We don't change who we are, but we change maybe how we go about it. So that's where it's like, that conversation, I made you do an exercise where it's like, tell me what your church values are, tell me what your personal values are, all of those things. And then that leads us into setting those priorities in a way that I think is so clarifying and so helpful. And it also gives you that sense of why on earth would we be doing that now?
Yeah.
Because we're so clear on what we're trying to accomplish going forward.
2 thoughts on that.
Yeah.
One is I think it helps when I am so clear with our values and priorities, and maybe we can share them, because I actually hate when I was first starting too, people like systems, values. Okay, cool. Name 3. Like, I don't know what any of this means. So I'd like to do that. But it begins to help people self-organize and self-solve. If those values are so clear and those priorities, they can go, oh yeah, you're right. This is silly that I'm doing this. So that's helpful. Because eventually we're at the size capacity where it's like, I can't have a deep conversation with every single person every single Sunday. There's no way. So it's like some of this stuff needs to be passed down and understood. But also even I gave feedback. I'm learning to give feedback as a leader. Okay, I'm going to give feedback, but I'm going to tie it to either one of our priorities or one of our values, because it's also a way. It's a way. I think they receive it better too. It's like, oh yeah, I signed up for this culture. I didn't realize that I was actually contributing negatively. You're right. That is against the value. And then if it's like they're constantly saying, no, I don't like that value. It's like, cool. This is who our church is. Yeah. So it goes back to that. And it's from Jim Collins, right? You need to be on the right seat on the right bus.
Sure. And
so then the conversations could be, are you in the right seat? Or even, are you even on the right bus? And that's fine. Like, I realize I'm so more free to realize, praise the Lord for other gospel-centered churches in our area. We're not the only thing around. And I get that we have like a pretty specific way that we do things, and it's okay if you don't want to do it that way.
So I think what you're really learning, which I think is so helpful and so important, is this idea that you have to figure out who you are as a congregation. So like you've heard me say this so many times this week, you don't want to create an organization that outstrips your people. So what do I mean by that? I mean that you don't want to create something that has to be run separately from the people that you serve. So I gave you a really silly example of like t-shirts in the church, right? It wasn't that we like eat the cost as the church for this. It's like, no, the church is the one giving you the money. This is the way that we recognize you for some shirts. Mm-hmm. It seeps into every aspect of who we are. But here's, I think, the really cool part of what I'm seeing and what really makes me hopeful in what you guys are doing. When you first get started, it is incredibly easy to look at other people and try to copy. Yes. And guess what?
Which is why I'm scared to share the actual values,
So yeah, and I knew you would be. That's why I'm trying to bring it up like head on. Mm-hmm. You start there. That's where everybody starts. We all start by copying.
Yeah, like I sounded like Louis Giglio and John Piper in 2010.
Exactly. Like you have to, right? That's how we learn. That's the rabbinic model. Like it's not a weird thing. But what happens is over time, if you don't start to embody those, or your values, you say this is a value for us, but then you're kind of veering off to the left, veering off to the right, it's not serving your people. So like, for instance, think Queen Creek for a minute. Yeah. Okay. Well, we're not going to give them like, this is really dumb and you would never do this, but like as a gift to our like Dream Team members, we're never going to give them a winter coat.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's so funny. Yeah.
It's like, I want to make it as silly as possible so that we understand it, because a lot of the people that I work with, they want to copy what they've seen, which is fine to start, but then contextualize it for your group of people, the people in front of you, the stage of life you're in. Practices is a great example. Like, should you do 3 a year? Maybe you guys can only do 1 a year.
Right.
There is no finish line. There's no like, I have to be on this particular race, or like, it's the race that's in front of you. So this is where, to me, your values are Holy Spirit led. If you're not constantly surrendering those things as the leader, then you will create something that outstrips the people in front of you. And so as you start to really focus in on, I think this serves our people well, you start to set priority. It immediately tells you what to say no to. That's a great idea, but that has nothing to do with what we're here to do. Yeah. You should have a great, strong culture. Is like, we have a mission. So I won't tell you what it is, but like Apple Retail had its own mission inside of Apple. And they had a very specific phrase that we use. Like it's very common knowledge within there that everything points back to this. So we won't give away.
The public doesn't know it?
No.
Really?
Yeah. The same thing, like you won't necessarily use this word. Yeah. But what exercise did we do that I was like, we've got to get to this point where you understand what the animating force is behind everything you do.
Yeah.
What do we do? How do we talk through that?
Man, it's just, we're trying to find one word.
Also, for the record, I'll just say this for him. We're all very tired. It's been a great week, but it's so long. Go ahead.
Yes. the end result was trying to find one word. What is something that can summarize us that like, so you gave examples that was a part of the exercise. And then we just started throwing around. I'm not sure beyond that what else you did, but like, so you were talking about like within the apple, it was care.
Yeah. Like, did you start with the right word?
No. I don't think it was too far off, but I do think it needed more clarity. Yeah.
And so that's just a small little nugget just to throw out here. Your first impulse may not be right, but it may be directionally right.
Exactly. That's
And so a lot of times though, one of two things will happen.
It sounded right until we found the better one. I was like, that other way was not the word.
Exactly. So you don't want to sit on your first idea just because it's your first idea and it's like, nope, that's it, because it's the most obvious and immediate.
Which I think is why I enjoy having a coach, because I will naturally go like, oh, it's a good enough idea. Let's move forward, because I want to get things done.
Yep.
And I don't, and I'm learning, you're helping me with this as a pastor. As a human, I analyze my experiences and I try to reflect on who I am. And so like on my walks and my runs and my prayers, I'm trying to, analyze the motives of the heart, but I don't bring that same reflective energy to my leadership. And I'm learning to, but it's helpful to have a coach to go like, let's reflect on that. Okay, what is the heartbeat behind this? Why did this happen? Why? So it's really nice. I've learned, because to be honest, I used to think, when I first started, it's funny. I think part of it's because I had the wrong coaches, but also part of it's because I wasn't at the stage where I needed one yet. So like I had a bunch of coaches and it was a part of our system, and I'm like, that was a waste of time. I don't know what happened. I want to be able to say, no, we did something. Because church world, we can be so guilty of getting together for absolutely no reason. And so even within the network I'm a part of, I have to drive into Phoenix, like the other side of Phoenix, waste gas. I was broke. Like it just never seemed to work out. So then for a while I was like, I don't like coaches, because what was that? We're just sitting around talking about nothing. And I do think, and maybe I can be wrong, but to use church metrics for our experience, we found like we jumped from like 70 to 100 to 200 when we put in the right like playbook, where I didn't actually even need a coach. It was like, here's 5 things that just, man, it's going to take some thoughts and me and Caleb were able to really like navigate it through. And we had version 1, version 2. I think we settled on version 5. So we did that, but we were able to do that internally. Yeah. But what we've noticed is now hitting that 200 barrier, or like we hit over it, but we're around there, 200, 250. There's no course or anything out there for 300. Like people make a lot of money or even just get a lot of attention saying how to break 200, which they mean is like how to hit 200, But I think it's because beyond 200, you need a coach, because now like you really have your own values, it's not just a plug and chug, which I think is your impulse too, is like, no, I want to have like relationships with these people and help navigate their specific situations, because it's not copy paste.
The copy paste thing is probably the biggest thing that drives me nuts once you've been established for a little while.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like,
because you just earlier said it was okay in the beginning.
Yep. It's the long-term, I don't know what to do, so I'm going to keep copying and pasting other people's things.
Purpose-driven's working right now. Let's do that. This is doing it. And the next
You don't need another thing.
Yeah.
Right? You need to double down on the things that God has called you to begin with and start to. So like, let's use that as the real example. Did we get rid of any of the things that you guys are doing in the church right now?
We just clarified everything. We didn't get rid of anything. If anything, we added stuff to help. Yeah.
But the clarity was we reorganized it and went, okay, we're going to take our driving force and we're going to take our mission over here, like the actual make disciples, not attenders. Then what is the purpose of this event? Okay, well, it's going to be, and you guys had already started to do some of this stuff. All we did was put language and kind of draw it out together.
Yeah.
But like, this is going to be for in-house. This one is going to be for in-house. So now we don't run the risk and we're not nervous about doing too many things that could possibly just create attenders.
Right.
Because the only people getting the invite are the ones who are part of the church. And that is part of discipleship, is being part of the church. So it's like self-reinforcing.
And even outreach events too fits within the paradigm of like, look, to make disciples actually is to be first of all, for our people to be evangelists. So we are equipping you to go be the ones talking to the parents, reaching out and all of that. And then, part of discipleship is to make them. So they have to start before being a disciple and then making them into one. But even that has more clarity. Like the win wasn't how many came today.
Yep, exactly. And so now you have it clarified that these are this sort of external facing and they have purpose behind them. That to me is the real beauty of it, is you're no longer trying to make a one size fits all event. You're not trying to make a one size fits all discipleship opportunity. It's okay that this is just for men now, but we haven't done it in a way that men are exclusive and we don't have those other things. Because I think your groups are a huge part of
the bread and butter.
Yes. And so like even the clarifying thing of the reason why we would have something for women or the reason why we would have something for men is because there's some value in getting the same group of people together to speak to them in a way that mixed company does not work as well.
Right.
So it totally tracks that we would do it like that. Okay. So now we've played around with the values idea, right? We've really honed in on what you guys care about.
Do I share my values and priorities? Or
Yeah, go for it. It's on screen now.
Yeah, right. Don't make me edit.
I wanted to do that so bad. I've never done that before, and I was excited. Sorry.
Don't make me edit.
It might not be on screen. Sorry.
No, I actually had made a video about my values, so link somewhere. Now I got to remember to do that. But so we had 5 values. And these are, and I'll admit, I was confused for a while because people would use values. And I'm like, do they mean culture? Do they mean, I didn't know what values meant. So when we delineated, okay, well, there's values and there's priorities, I was like, okay, that's it. So values are more like who we want to embody, even when I'm not there on Sunday, like I'm living this life. So sometimes I refer to it as our leadership culture.
Yep.
Because it's like our standard for if you're a leader. So when we honor people on Sunday mornings, we honor one person in the room, I have to mention one of those values. So our 5, and I'll be brief because I have a whole video on like what each one means. But for us, we never stop learning. We never compare. We never give up. We never hold back, and we're never alone. When I was starting those values, this was 9 years ago when I created those. It was just, and I'm not slamming anybody, but the way my brain worked, I heard a lot of values were like compassion, humility, grace. And I think these are Bible words, but like, so instead of saying humility, we said we never stop learning. Because I wanted to say like, no, this is core to who we are. We are constantly learning from everybody around us, from our stages in life, from the circumstance, from the preschooler to all of that. So I wanted more like, no, we never, at the same time though, what we've helped identify is within those values, there are shadow sides to the value that we can all of a sudden corner ourselves in. So I'm trying to think of an example we were thinking about. Never hold back. So never hold back has this idea of like, man, we believe in excellence. So like we don't cut corners. We go all in. At the same time, like we never hold back, like we keep short accounts with each other. But a mature adult holds back their anger, right? Yeah. A mature adult holds back from sharing all of their opinions because it's actually not helpful. So you can use, well, I never held back. Okay, let's define what this is, what's this not. Yeah. There's always a bad version of everything. And I even think like when you look at freedom in the United States of America, that's their value. That's our value. There's a very shadow side version of freedom that we're seeing today because I think biblically it was freedom from sinning. Now we interpret it as freedom to sin.
Yep.
And it's all under the banner of freedom. So to me, that's like the understanding of there's totally a shadow side.
So I think what you're really hinting at is this idea of your values, right, are arbitrary words that you're picking that help define something.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's like, it doesn't really matter. But what I love is you didn't want to use certain words and you wanted to use other ones. That's the hallmark of a strong culture because you've made a decision and said, this is the way that we do things. Those are subtle cues as to whether or not your culture has taken root. You have your own language and your own speak, so to speak. And then from there, right, those things start to determine the priorities themselves of what you guys will and won't do.
Yeah.
We never give up. You just set a priority for yourself based on your value.
Yeah.
We're going to keep going.
I love endurance.
Because for the race before us. Like that whole idea is right there rooted in that. Can you put a scripture on it? Sure.
Yeah.
Like it's, but whatever makes sense contextually for you guys. But what I love is that when you get to then the next stage, which is the brand part of it, if you were to start giving up on things, right? Or if you were to start holding back things and then all of a sudden dropping
Cutting
bombs in
corners.
your church, going like, we didn't tell you this thing that's been going on for 6 years. Okay. You violated your values. So there is this idea of brand deposits and brand withdrawals. Every time you do something, and what people don't understand is it's not the brand itself. It is all the stuff that goes into the brand. So it's your values and it's the priorities that you set. Who gets really frustrated when you say, we're going to do this thing, but then no one's actually working on that thing. We're working on this thing over here.
Yeah.
You're not doing the priority that you set for yourself.
So you got to be, so I've learned, be very careful what you're telling your people are going to do. Because maybe, and we're human, and I think you have to own up to it and go, guys, 5 months ago I said we're going to do this. That hasn't been done yet. That's on me. I'm sorry. But you do that 10 times.
And the problem is
it ain't working well for you.
Exactly. The problem is you get all of the weight of like being a husband in a marriage, like where you're held accountable for all of those things, but your words are actually amplified because of your positional authority.
And that's something you've taught me. I think out loud, and that's not great for a lead pastor to do.
In certain circumstances.
Yeah.
Right? Like you have to have that trusted circle of people, but also it is to me the kindness.
The Proverbs talk about it. Like the more you talk, the more you'll sin.
Exactly.
You know? So
just best to be quiet. End of podcast. No, but that idea of like actually taking the time to say to someone in front of you, this isn't me saying we're doing this. I am thinking out loud. That is a sign of respect. That is a sign of self-awareness that I have a tendency to do this, but it's also an acknowledgement of I'm in a position that has authority and weight. And so I don't want you to be confused. It's called good leadership.
I have been shocked by that where I'm like, this person thought I said they can do this? Oh, I thought everyone knew we were thinking out loud. And no, so like that's on me. But it's interesting because when we were at a different stage of growth in our seasons, I could think out loud and people didn't care. It was like the past whatever. I was like, oh, this has shifted. And I need to shift with it to best honor the culture that we have, the people that we have, and not confuse them.
Absolutely. I think you shifted, and what you're starting to see is you've shifted from positional authority to moral authority. Your words and actions have aligned long enough and people have experienced you long enough, which is like that last piece of it is like, how do people experience you, your church, the things that you have created? How do they actually experience you? And so you've moved from, I'm just the pastor. Okay, well, I've been the pastor for 2 days. It doesn't take away anything when you first started, but you've had one Sunday gathering. Yeah. So yes, it is true you are the pastor. The same thing as any position that you take. You are that thing day one. Yeah. All rights and privileges.
Good point.
But you have to earn the trust of the people in front of you.
I was buddy for so long.
And now you've been at it, what, 9 years? Yep. Okay, so that's some hard knocks. In a row. We didn't quit. But that's such a huge thing.
That's a good
right?
point.
You actually earned.
Which is why people say you'll always overestimate what you can do in a year and underestimate what you can do in 10. I hated that phrase when I was launching because I'm like, this is my first year. No, I'm going to do some great things. Now I'm like, that nothing truer has been said. Obviously, there has been more things true, but that is so accurate for my experience.
It makes me think of, and I think this is like an important thing to just call out. When you started, how many of the people, and this is not a calling out thing, I'm going to just go ahead and preface this by saying this is how organizations or churches in general, like anybody grows.
Yeah, so you don't.
So how many of the people that you started with are still with you? Rough percentage, no names.
Oh, wow. I mean, the percent, that's even hard to do. My wife's still with me.
Okay, great. That's a huge win. Doesn't always happen.
We're talking launch day. Yeah, just a couple families.
Okay, couple families. Now, does that mean you've done something wrong or you failed? Along the way, absolutely, we've done some things wrong. That's part of growth. But it does not mean that just because of the people that you started with, okay, Israelites, the ones that got out of Egypt, didn't actually make it into the promised land. It was the next gen.
It's like they grumbled, though. So.
They grumbled. Okay, well, that's a story for a different day. That'll preach, though. Yeah. But the idea is that often things are more long-term.
Yeah.
And often your first founders are the people that helped you get something started, or not the people that help you take it to the next stage in growth, either because they have given all that they have to give and they need a rest. That's a real thing.
Right.
Like they were the ones for 3 years that dug their heels in, did the setup, did all the things, and then they needed a break.
Yep.
And that's okay, because like as much as they're attached to your mission and vision, they are not, they don't have the same level of calling that you would, that this is what God has called me to do, to lead these people, whoever's in front of me, to be faithful.
Yeah. And it's really important, because I think I would villainize those people in the beginning to make myself feel better. And sometimes the reasons were dumb, but other times there's like, no, like the Lord is really,
and I think that's
different.
That's such a part of being in leadership anywhere, is how do you handle perceived betrayals? And do you have enough people around you to help you go, that's not a real betrayal? Right. So I've told you this story 1,000 times, and we've only recently uncovered the Emperor Has No Clothes story.
Yeah.
We've shed light on that, but it's, to me, that is one of the most important things. No matter what size or stage you're in right now, get a couple of people, right? If you call them elders, if you call them deacons, if you call them trusted people in the room, I don't care what you call them, you have to have them. When they are the ones who can tell you, you're actually walking around naked.
Right. And my never stop learning value upholds that for us. And so I have those people.
Exactly.
You were speaking to the listener. Yeah, like figure
Absolutely.
that out.
You have to figure that out as fast as you can.
And what's funny though is, so I would hear, just to also sympathize with those in different seasons, I would hear that warning. And I set that up. Like I've always had people in that way. But there are stages where that's not your problem.
Yep.
But then all of a sudden it quickly can become the problem. So like, I'm like, look, listen, when I'd hear like pastors, they need more accountability, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I just want 10 people at my church to follow what I'm saying. And like, we might actually build something, so like, it's like, dude, I just feel like I am just trampled on and walked over, and I feel like I have no respect, and I get that I need to earn that. But like, I am in a low spot, and you're telling me I have all those issues, and you know what I'm so but then all of a sudden overnight, it's like, wow, we had 3 months of momentum. People are saying, okay, you're good. You're great at what you're doing. It's like, whoa, it is amazing how quickly that shifts.
Yeah, it really is. I think you have to take the time to learn about yourself, learn about the people around you, to work on the skills of developing, like recognizing, but also like everybody needs encouragement.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are.
Thank you. Amen.
Everybody needs encouragement. This is I hesitate to call it a job, but it is a job unlike any other job. You deal with all aspects of the human being, and you deal with a high level of criticism for yourself. Most people, if they don't like their therapist, they just get a new one, right? And you might endure them for one time, but like the fee is too high to go in there and complain to them that they're not a great therapist.
They'll go to a different restaurant.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This one, you may actually have people that stay with you.
Yeah.
And they're going to keep telling you how bad of a job you're doing. And you can't fire them.
Right.
Right.
That's funny.
And so that's, to me, the difference, though. That's not
you're
what
naming it. Where I'm like, look, there's such a over reaction, and it's like, we shouldn't honor or encourage pastors. I'm like, they need encouragement.
They do.
It's hard.
It
and
is
ironically, sometimes it's the pastors who don't get like genuine. So in my mind, there's a paradigm between flattery and honor. So flattery is like gas to a narcissist. Like but honor, I think if some pastors were honored sooner in their trajectory, it actually, in a weird way, does keep you humble when you do the honoring the right way.
So how you do that, I think, matters immensely. You're honoring the character of the person, not their achievement.
Yes.
That is what most people like. That is what makes it flattery versus like a genuine honoring. You see the thing that is often overlooked or unseen. You are saying, I actually see you. And I see that like these are the struggles and these are the achievements, but I see the person behind here, and we are celebrating that person. Because how many times have you risen to the level of something that somebody said about you, even though you felt like it was wildly untrue?
Right.
Like, but no, they view me that way. Like you stand up a little taller, right? You think of yourself a little
Key
bit.
to parenting.
Exactly. And what I think is missing, and this is part of that spiritual direction thing, is just understanding how gracious God is. Okay. So the Lord is slow to anger. Okay. I think a lot of pastors think God is mad that they haven't achieved enough yet. Long in nostril, right? The deep, long breath out. We are meant to be like him. So we should not get so angry so quickly. We should be very forgiving, long in nostril with our people. It's such a huge thing, right? We're all trying to become more like Jesus. The person that you become matters more than your achievements. Tell yourself that every day. But also understand that though you are deeply, deeply flawed, we all are, you are deeply, deeply loved. And I think if pastors spent more time worrying less about some of these other things and actually experience the love of God in themselves, it would transform so many aspects of their church, because you're not working from a deficit at that point. You're actually encouraged to do the work. Your screw up. I mean, imagine this picture of God for just a second. We're veering into spiritual direction, but this is how it works. Imagine your kid falls off the bike, right? My kid right now is learning how to ride a bike, and she falls off. And the first thing I say to her is, well, I saw that coming. Okay. How many of us have that same narrative though about God? Instead of, no, if it's your kid, you'll run over and you'll make sure they're okay and you'll get them back up, and you want to get them back on the bike as soon as possible because you care enough to help them and support them. So you make sure you look at their boo-boos and you give them a kiss and you put them back on the bike and you say, I'm here, we're going to keep going. And you maybe give them a little push, right? If we could just wrap our minds around that version of God in some of our seasons of life. It's not the only version of God that there is. He is multifaceted. He is multidimensional. He has all of these different attributes. But I think if you remind yourself of that, you can experience the other attributes from a very different place.
Yeah. His
holiness becomes, why wouldn't I want to be like my Father?
Exactly.
Instead of, I am scared. Right? Because that's the reaction. I'm a man of unclean lips and I live amongst a people of unclean lips. Okay. I'm scared because we're not doing the stuff that we want to. Then Jesus paints this picture of the dad that runs out. Okay. And this story really does bother me. I know it's a tangent and you can cut it, but this story of the father, right, who runs out to the son, right? And here's the thing that I thought about for the older brother. He already got his stuff cut in half. With the restoration of the son, it gets cut in half again, right? That's how lavish, though, the generosity is of the father. And I don't think we really realize that. And I think if you can get to the point, and this applies to other church leaders, that you celebrate them instead of being bitter. When things are going well, here's the test of your own heart, your own character, and your own ministry. If you want to experience this kind of encouragement, this kind of love, etc., you also have to give it. So in your own circle, to your own pastors, how often are you building them up to the point where they're like, it's getting uncomfortable? Okay?
Right.
Because that's when they're starting to hear it. We don't do it enough. And so then it's like the three other local pastors. One of the things I loved this week, and I'll just brag on you for a second, one of the things I loved was how much you celebrated. We met in that coffee shop and you would see other pastors or other leaders in the church, and how much you just said you were so proud of them and things like that. You were celebrating them even as you saw them, even though they're 4 streets down and quote unquote competing for the same people in the same city. It's no, we are genuinely that idea of unity, right? We missed it. It's not about agreeing with everything somebody says, but it's being for one another in the way that God is for us.
Yeah. When a couple years in, really discouraged about how slow our growth was. Really discouraged because up to that point, I was a poster boy for ministry in Arizona. I was preaching at 16, had my own thing at 18, all that stuff, graduated, taught my class, and then reality hits. And nobody cares. And wow, we had 40 people on Sunday. I learned to pray this prayer: God, don't give me success until I can root for everybody else's. And on my lowest days, that was so hard to pray, but I kept thinking it'd be really cool if I became that type of person. So I'll pray it now, because it's easy to pray when you are successful. How can I actually pray this now? And then like one anchor quote from good old Adrian Rogers from way back in the day. He says, if you want love, give it. If you want encouragement, give it. Whatever you want, give it away. And that's the irony, is like the most honoring thing for me is to honor other people. It's so fun. There's such it almost feels selfish, like when you brag on others, like I feel so good now,
I mean, Jesus said it, it's better to give than to receive. Okay. Like somehow that is better. So when I do that for other person, whatever you do for the least of these, like it's that same mentality. And I think that's where, when we really parse a lot of this stuff out, when we really look at it, if it's not embodying the way Jesus did kingdom work, then we're building our own thing, and it's our own empire, and it's just gonna end up as dust.
Yeah.
Right. But when you sow into the kingdom, like it is so different. And you and I have had that conversation many times about different things where it's like, I'll tell you what the business world will tell you to do, and then I'll tell you what the kingdom would say.
Yeah.
Because it's the most like, what is the most generous response? What is I give you the shirt off my back, not just the coat that you asked for. And it's dangerously close to being walked over.
Yeah.
But it's also at the same time, like, who was the most walked over person in the history of humanity? It was Jesus. And so,
and if you trust in the God of abundance, if you trust that the unseen doesn't go unnoticed.
Absolutely.
Like I was thinking James talks about, what we're actually hitting a lot on is James chapter 3, when he talks about envy, bitter envy, and selfish ambition. But then he goes on to say that anytime those exist, it's earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. That earthly phrase does mean like all you can see is the here and now. But when we think eternally, it's almost like, and Jesus says, like, when you're persecuted, praise the Lord, because great is your reward in heaven. When you learn to view all of this as like, actually, I'm going to take the lower seat because I'm investing in an eternal account. There's actually this joy in being overlooked, this joy in not getting what you wanted in the here and now, because this doesn't matter as much compared to what's coming. And when your character is one of the North Stars for you, right? Like, that's what I love so much. You're mentioning a lot of like Eugene Peterson stuff. Like Eugene Peterson really helped animate. I think he would agree with that idea. Spiritual director, not Sunday director. His Burning in My Bones, the memoir they wrote for him, the biography, man, so good. I was like tear stains on that book, but forgot where was I going with that. But I lost it.
Well,
keep going.
I mean, Eugene Peterson is huge, right? Like, I think to both of us, like we've both drawn a lot of inspiration, but I think found.
Oh yeah, I got it.
What the balance in the heart is.
Yeah, because he had that. Remember in that story, his neighbor or friend, somebody who's an atheist, drew an art piece of him, but of his life hollowed out. Like, hey, if you keep doing ministry, this is what you're gonna look like, and it's just like terrible. But he put it up in his office as a reminder that if I don't follow the way of Jesus, if I do this the American way, of manufacturing attendees, like that's who I'm going to become. So that's what was helpful for me, because I used to think my worth was based off of who came on Sunday.
Yeah. Now
it's, first of all, my worth is bound up in the love of Christ. And my biggest project, what does Dallas Willard say? The greatest thing God is looking for is who you become. However that phrase is.
Yeah.
It's so helpful in the low seasons. Like, oh, but I'm becoming someone because of this. So I can keep pressing forward.
I think that's the lesson that is a continual learning process, right? He often says, like, you are an unceasing spiritual being. Okay. Even the language of that is more inspiring than just like, you're a dude.
Right.
Like, and sometimes I think we don't elevate people's thinking far enough towards the eternal. Yeah. Like, it's eternal life now. Like, you're able to.
did that well too.
He did. And I think for me, like going back to Eugene Peterson, the line which is so important to me. It's not treating your people like customers, but as souls in formation. And there's another idea behind that, though, which is like you are a soul in formation.
Yep.
And you have to have those rhythms that you're talking about to sustain you over time. If you
Watch your life and doctrine closely.
Exactly. So if you don't start to really pay attention to that now, what are those little places of unease and unrest that you're experiencing now?
Yeah.
Those get multiplied over time. Right. And so how do you help address some of those things? I think if you can get to this idea that grace is not opposed to effort, to quote the great Dallas Willard, grace is not opposed to effort, it's opposed to earning, should be on your wall as a pastor.
Yeah.
Because you are going to have to put in a Herculean effort.
And it's in the Bible. Make every effort.
Make every effort. Right. But at the same time, where is that coming from? Is it the overflow, or is it out of like a need to earn God's, like, well, God, I did this. Now, why aren't you blessing it?
Right.
How many of the, like, I mean, go back, just look at the life of Paul. It's a little rough, right? Like, and we're like, man, you know, nobody showed up today, or like my computer's not working. And it's like, we're, you know, I'm there with Paul, and it's like, not quite. And not to trivialize anything. These are hard.
Yeah.
We live in different times, right?
Yeah.
We have problems that they couldn't even imagine.
Yeah.
Right.
We have different capacities and
exactly. Like the whole idea of a smartphone was not in Paul's purview.
Right.
At all. And so like, that's a whole new modern challenge, and pastors are called to rise to the challenge. They're called to rise to, this is the type of thing that's going to keep your people. The distraction thing is going to keep your people from experiencing God more than just like the general culture and things like that that's out there. It's in their pocket, and it's actually well-intentioned. They go for the Bible app, but see something else. Like, how do you rewind the clock a little bit to help people understand how to get back into their body and live an embodied existence?
Yeah.
Because we are the body of Christ, not just the mind at that point.
And in the non-anxious pastor. There it is. There it is. Yeah. I quote Ruth Haley Barton's line, "The best gift you can give the people you lead is your own transforming self." There's a lot of other quotes from people that say the same thing.
Exactly.
I think, I heard one the other day from McShane, you know, the Bible reading plan guy.
Yeah.
You know, he died at 29. He was like did all sorts of stuff, and I think he died at 29. But yeah, like, we lead from our own transformation. And that's also, like, I love that, though. It's like, man, I could be failing at this Sunday director stuff. I could be stumbling along the way, which isn't an excuse. But what is great is what's more important is, am I walking the narrow way and inviting other people along with me? Like, God's going to show so much grace, and we're going to get there. So
you talk about the narrow way, and like, just to kind of explain, for me, like, this became like the passion of my life, and it became I think the thing that I'm trying to embody. So like, the reason why I named the thing Narrow and Sparrow is because I have chosen to walk the narrow way, chosen constraints, chosen to pursue Jesus and not these other ways, because I haven't found a better way to live.
Yeah.
And I love that Willard says, like, if you could find a better way to live, Jesus would be the first person to tell you to go take it.
Yeah.
Like, he is that confident in the truth.
And Peter says, to whom else would we go? I read that this morning in John 6.
Exactly. And then the other part of that, though, for me, it's always like tensions and paradoxes, right? So for me, the tension is, I'm walking on the narrow way, but I'm remembering the God who cares about the sparrows, right? And he cares more about me than them. And like, when you watch birds and like, you see them, and like, I'm going to bring this story because it's, you know, like, one of the craziest things, right? We had this experience one time where
they're going to pull down our channel.
They are. A bird got caught in a, what was it? Like,
it was a glue mousetrap.
Yeah, a glue mousetrap.
In the
and
garage.
Man, our hearts were torn for this bird, and we were trying to rescue this bird, and we didn't know what to do, but eventually we had to put this bird out of its misery. Okay. Like, and it was rough, because like, even though you hunted and things like that, there was just something about a helpless trapped bird that we couldn't.
I just wanted to shoot it, but you were like, let's find a way. So
we
I
tried.
entertained you for a while.
We tried to rescue it. It did not work. But at the end of the day, like, God cares for that bird And it's just this idea of like, it's not about the bird. It's about the small, tiny little details of your life. That it is Emmanuel, God with us, is not just the Christmas story, but it's for every day.
Yeah.
Right? That with God life. And so the invitation is really to live in that. Like, we're called to remember as much as we are, if not more than to obey. In remembering who God is, right? You can fact check me. But that's
the comments will.
That's the I love that. But I think that's the thing, is remembering who God is on a daily basis. That he is God who's gracious, he's compassionate, he's slow to anger, like abounding in steadfast love. Like all of these ways that God is described. You live in that reality of this is the God that is here, and I get to give my life because, to your point of what Peter says, where else would we go? You have the words of eternal life. And I think when you get that idea in your soul, and we all need to be reminded of it, because even talking about it right now, I'm like, well, where was that like last night when I was like up with my anxious thoughts? Like, where was that? Like, you have to preach that to yourself. You have to remind yourself of that. You have to remember. And so there's all the practical things that go about it. But I think if you can find a way to live in that tension where it's like, yes, the way is difficult that leads to life. But, there's a God who cares about me and is with me along the way. I think if you can do those two things, like that's what endurance ends up meaning. And it does mean that at times you're going to have to do the hard work. You're going to have to go back and look at the shadow side of who you are. You're going to have to go back and say, I led our church down the wrong road.
Yeah.
Because like I wasn't as in tune with the Lord's steps as I thought I was at that point. Or we have changed and we have grown. But I think if you take the time daily to live in that tension, like over the course of time, how you spend your days, to quote the famous line, how you spend your days is how you spend your life.
Right.
And you are walking with people and inviting them on that narrow way on a daily basis to walk with you. And when they see you walking it first, they will follow.
Yep. Follow me as I follow Christ.
Exactly. If you don't find that people are following you, don't look at the people, look at your own life.
I think it's a perfect place to stop. So thank you guys. Comment below your favorite takeaway. And if you are a pastor, at least entertain going to narrowandsparrow.com and creating a coaching relationship. I just can't speak enough on how much it's really helped our church. I hope you see that there's a balance. Like, yeah, there is ways to get better and more efficient, but also it's walking along the narrow way, making sure our hearts are in the right place. So thank you for your time. So appreciate you. And guys, we'll see you on the next one. Thank you for watching today's video. This is the video I think you should watch. This is the video YouTube says you should watch.